want to pick up on one of Jeff's comments that we can reach more people than I can reach, and talk a little bit about a program that I've been co-directing at Colorado State for the last 7 years. This is just a quick list of things that we've already heard about in this session, and I would want to point out that these talks all drew on a pretty wide variety of disciplines, most of them on more than one itself. And what we've been doing is trying to make even broader that disciplinary reach on the subject of climate change. So our program is called Changing Climates at Colorado State, and our webpage is called 100 Views of Climate Change. My husband, also colleague in the English department, is the other person running this. He's running a communication session right now, so he's not here, I don't think. This started, just going to tell you a little bit about how we did it. We started at our kitchen table one day feeling quite concerned about climate change as a thing itself, and also about the bad state of communication about it, trying to figure out what the heck we could do. We're both writers, and we thought, well, maybe we should write books and essays and stories and poems. And then we thought, nah, we don't need to do that. Maybe we'll do something with teaching. So we ended up starting this program on the premise that climate change is really everybody's business, it's everybody's problem, and that we're going to need everybody's skills and perspectives to deal with this. We developed a lot of our starting ideas by sitting at that table with the university's phone book in front of us and looking at the department lists and trying to figure out if there were any departments that would have absolutely nothing to say about climate change. And we could only come up with one, and that was occupational therapy. We also have come increasingly to think that it's a really good idea for all of us to know at least a little bit of something that all the other people know. So it's really good for me as an English professor to know what the climate scientists think, or the political, or the sociologists. I think it's equally a good idea for the sociologists and the climate scientists to know a little bit about what arts and humanities people know, and to be able to see what other people see. So what we did was we just asked around. We'd been at CSU for long enough to know some people, and we asked the people we knew, and they asked other people, and we gathered a bunch of people and got a room from the Dean of Liberal Arts, brainstormed, and then we just decided to jump in. We didn't ask anybody's permission. We didn't wait for any permission. We didn't apply for any grants. I'll talk a little bit about money, but mostly we just decided we were just going to do it, and we were going to do it fast. So we started, actually, I think originally we thought this is all we would do, is run a series of lectures of faculty teaching faculty. We thought we might have 35, 50 people come. The first one we had 80, and then we had 120. Those audiences got bigger. It was a semester-long series, and they were such a success. We found out, for example, that the main policy people didn't necessarily know the main climate science people on campus. They knew about each other, but they hadn't met. And this was one way that they could meet. Then we decided to take a version of that same series of lectures out to the whole student body and to the community. So we did another lecture series the next year. We did two-day teach-ins with a whole lot more talks on a much wider variety of subjects by a lot of different faculty. And then after we'd done this for a couple of years, we found that some other entities on campus formed and started taking over some of the job of organizing talks, especially about climate science. So we started filling in on some of the gaps. These are two of the examples. We had James Balog. You probably know about him. He started life as a geologist, but he really is an artist, a filmmaker, a photographer now, and he came in and did the sorts of things that art can do. And on the right, it's a wonderful collection of about 100 moral leaders from around the world talking about moral and religious reasons that people care about the future of the earth. And we had an event based on that book with a bunch of ethicists and faith leaders and writers coming to do that. We've put on over 120 talks. We've had over 120 different speakers. We drew from 27 academic departments on campus to give these talks. Those 27 departments were from all 8 of the colleges on campus, including libraries. I mean, really everybody was there. And we also had people from a bunch of other entities on campus, like the facilities people, off campus, like the city Climate-Wise program, and a few from out of town, not very many. These are a few of the faces that go with the talks. I was thinking there are 2 of these people on this chart are at AGU. The rest would probably never come to this conference. And our audience counts, we quit counting at about 6,000. It's probably a little bit higher than that. So it was just sort of wildly successful, way more successful than we had any idea it would be. And I think we were just doing something at the right time. There was a hunger for it. We also did a little bit of coaching of our speakers. We asked the climate scientists to imagine themselves talking to an auditorium or a large room full of poetry students and fashion design students. And we asked the major poet that we had come in to talk to a room full of physicists and computer people who'd never read a poem in their life. And everybody really rose to those challenges and did fabulously understandable talks. And we did a lot of aggressive advertising. It cost us almost nothing when it boils right down to it. We just started it. We asked our dean for $1,000. We actually didn't need that much from her. Manna just started falling from heaven. People started coming up to us and saying, do you want some money? And in every case we said, well, I guess, you want to buy us some cake and lemonade. But it was really very inexpensive. But the big thing that happened here is that an NSF-funded cloud modeling center on campus, CMAP, adopted us. They needed a little bit more of what we were doing, and they offered us support that was just hugely important. Scott's out there in the audience. Dave is probably here someplace. We're part of the Education and Diversity group, and they've funded travel. That's why I'm here. They've given us time. They bought us a course off. But I think really at least as important is that they've put us in a community of people who are interested in this kind of stuff and who are stimulating and cool friends, and they encourage us when we get exhausted. And they've allowed us to run a website. So for about 5 years, I've been running this website, which is multidisciplinary as much as I can possibly make it. This is what we aim for: primer level clarity, college level content. We want it lively. I annotate every entry. There are between 450 and 500 entries now. These are the major pages. So we have 3 pages that are basically about the climate itself, a couple that are basically about nature, natural stuff, and things that we have to do with for food. Impacts from people, and then ethics, art, and literature. That's a lot to cram into 2 pages. They're somewhat overwhelming pages, but there's lots to say about those things. The taking action, we've got 4 subsets, as you can see right there. We have a picture called a page called the Big Picture that is sources that don't stick to anything easier to categorize, that do a little bit of a lot of things. We have a whole page on communication. And then more recently, I've been creating new pages on topics, and these are the pages that are up there. I have several more in mind when I get around to them. Probably the most interesting one to work on recently was the one on emotions. I started noticing how much just plain old grief and despair get in the way of ordinary people who start learning about this and just feel completely overwhelmed and don't know what to do. And also it's a problem for people who do work on it all the time and get completely overwhelmed and aren't sure what they're doing matters. We have some handouts mostly about communication. We have a Facebook page. We have learned that communication is key. We might be expected to think this as communication people from the get-go. We're already really interested in language and how language works, and we're interested in storytelling and how that works. We do a little bit of communication training, especially for young scientists who want to be more comfortable at talking to the general public or to non-specialists. One of the things we've learned, I think we expected this a little, but not nearly as much as it turns out is the case, is that people from different disciplines don't have the same shared knowledge at all, and often what we don't know is what each other think are the super basic things, like I think I was born knowing this, but maybe Jim doesn't know it at all, or Jim is sure that he was born knowing something, but I don't remember ever learning that. Maybe it was in grade school. So why carbon was important was one I didn't actually remember why carbon was important. And the political scientist we work with most often says that people don't know what she means by fairness, though it's a key term for her. And it turns out some of the climate scientists and the sociologists mean 2 different things by vulnerability. And I've had to explain what a story arc is to very smart scientists, and I was personally born knowing what a story arc was. So that's been one of the things. This is, I don't really need to go into these. These are the basic communication principles. It's also, again, one of those things that in our department would be super basic. You would never have to point this out to anybody. It's not that we all do it, but we know. So you want to talk as a person. That means you let people know who you are and why you're interested. Use ordinary language so you don't make them figure out what you're saying while they're listening to you. You tell stories, you make it vivid, you distill it to what is really key, all of those things. There have been a ton of rewards from doing this. I heard a paper the other day that was what's the word I'm wanting? When you figure out how well it's worked at the end, assessment of a project, and her list of benefits that other people, that the people participating in this multidisciplinary effect had suggested that they'd received was pretty much exactly what I tell people if they ask me why I do this. It's really challenging. It's really fun to meet all these new people and hang out with different people. It's actually a constant learning curve, which is stimulating, and we all feel like we're doing really good work. These are the people I listed on the program as collaborators, but there are many, many more people I could have put on here. I just wanted to indicate the range of disciplines that we do. And I also wanted to say finally, with my last slide, now that I know I have a little bit of time, that as I've been at AGU this week, I'm probably one of, 2 to 5 humanists in the whole thing, and maybe there are another 5 artists here. So I'm really a fish out of water, but it is the 3rd time I've been here, so I'm getting sort of used to it. I kind of know my way around the buildings, and I can talk to people at poster sessions, and I can listen to a lot of the sessions. I've seen a pretty big change in the 3 years and the number of talks that are really understandable to somebody like me, which is cool. But I do keep hearing people saying things that indicate that they think that science can solve everything, that science has access to everything important. And I would just like to say that that's probably not true. Maybe all the scientists together, maybe everybody at AGU, maybe if you add in the Ecological Society of America, you might have a really good grip on a half of the elephant, but there's another half of the elephant out there, and some of that part of the elephant is not quantifiable. You can't really test it in the same way. It needs to be approached through completely different methods, and sometimes those methods are in parts of the university, like the arts and the humanities, that you might not think about talking to and collaborating with, and I would like to urge everybody to do that.
We have a minute or so for questions, and do you know what everyone is? Okay. Were there any questions? We could also talk as we go off into the break. The session...
Wait, quick question.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So, what did you learn from coming to AGU?
Well, I've been going to a lot of the education and communication talks, and I've been learning a lot of things about what other people are doing and what they find. Like all the talks today, I was taking notes like mad. I've taken a lot of notes. So that's one thing. Another thing is that like my colleagues in the English department, who don't all think that, in fact, most of them don't think there's any need for them to listen to any scientists about anything. I think everybody is pretty locked into their disciplinary perspectives. Even if we think we're interdisciplinary, it's probably a fairly narrow thing. And I've been kind of noticing that here as well. So I guess there's a lot of work to do, but there's a lot more people doing it than there used to be.
Thanks, everybody who stayed. Thanks to all the speakers. Thanks to my colleagues that helped put this together. And we will continue this with another session in 310 just down the way. So please come back, because if you thought this group was great, the next group are just about orgasmic. So you'll have a lot of fun, okay?